So the topic for today is relationship with the teacher, and which is usually a topic of interest to everybody because we have all kinds of ideas and projections about teachers, and sometimes the transference goes on. Those are your psychologists know about transference. It happens here. So I'm just going to read the thing that I handed out and say a few comments, and then see if we can explore this topic. And you can be honest, but don't say bad things about me. Okay. So this is I took this extract out of a book I wrote about my Zen life. When one of his students was complaining about how he did not set a proper example, Ajahn Chah, a Buddhist teacher, said, "Yes, it's true, a teacher should set an example for his disciples. I don't mind that you criticize. If I were absolutely perfect in outward form, it would be terrible. You would all be too attached to me. Even the Buddha would sometimes tell his disciples to do one thing and then do another thing himself. Your doubt in your teacher can help you. You watch your own reactions. Wisdom is for you to watch and develop. Take from the teacher what is good. Be aware of your own practice. If I am resting while you all must sit up, does that make you angry? One of my teachers ate very fast. He made noises as he ate, yet he told us to eat slowly and mindfully. I used to watch him and get very upset. I suffered, but he didn't. Looking outside the self, you will not find happiness, nor will you find peace if you spend your time looking for the perfect person or the perfect teacher. The Buddha taught us to look at the Dharma, the truth, not to look at other people." That's the end of that quote. Students often go through a series of stages when relating to their teacher. First, there's always skepticism until trust is established. Second, there is idealization of the teacher as the perfect being. Third, there's demonization when the student learns that the teacher has human foibles. He or she gets frustrated with practice and starts to project his or her negative biases on the teacher. Often the relationship is mutually abandoned at this point. If the student can see through his or her resistance to practice and projections on the teacher, the next phase can be realized. And I quote my Dharma sister, Joan Halifax Roshi, for the next phase. It says, "There's a relationship that's based on difference in capacity, but also upon a kind of equality. We project our enlightenment on our teachers. We also project our negative qualities on our teachers. What we need to do is to understand the process in order to enter into a more normalized relationship with our teacher. You care about your teacher, the well-being of that person, just as you would care for your grandmother or your parents. And your teacher cares about you. There's a kind of intimacy and love that is very important." As you all know, my teacher was Shishin Wick Roshi, and he died a little over 20 years ago, but I studied with him for 23 years and lived with him for 8 years and saw him on almost a daily basis. And in the mid-80s, it became obvious to everybody in the community, that, we all knew that he drank. I mean, he liked to drink a lot, and after sessions, some students would gather around him. People used to say that the true Dharma would come out when he was drunk, but I realized that was just enabling later, although he was very incisive when he was drunk. But then he started having relations with women in the community, sexual relations. It's when it all came out, it caused a real problem in the community. And a lot of people left at that time. But I stayed with him, and people asked me why I stayed. Well, we all have our justifications. There's two things I want to say about that. One is that he was one of the most important mentors to me in my life, as much as my father. And I would never have abandoned my father. But the other thing is that he apologized. He acknowledged his behavior and apologized for it. And he continually apologized to the Sangha for the rest of his life after that, which was about 10 more years. And that was important to me, that, at least he acknowledged, that he was causing problems. And he said, that one of the violations, of our big violations of our precepts is to cause dissension in the Sangha, which is what he acknowledged that he did. And like I said, he continually apologized after that. But like I said in the reading, you have to find the good things, that you can take, but you don't have to take everything. For example, I would have never asked him how to raise my children, even though he was my teacher. And we idealize them. Oh, they know everything. Like the time I saw the Dalai Lama in Boulder, and they took questions from the audience, and somebody asked him, how should I raise my children so that they're compassionate and caring? And he thought for a minute, and he said, why are you asking me? I'm a monk. So we think that these teachers, which we projection enlightenment on, they're supposed to know everything. So I certainly don't pretend to, and but what are teachers? What are the role of teachers? What's the relationship with teachers? And certainly Maizumi Roshi was well versed in the Dharma, in the sense of teaching the Dharma, he was an expert at how to deal with koans, but he also helped me touch places in myself that were closed off, that I could open up, and I certainly appreciated it. But we always have to do it ourselves. And as there's a koan where Master Bokshu said that, don't you know that in all of China there are no Zen teachers? So what does that mean, no Zen teachers? I mean, we say that our true self is our true teacher, but then Dogen will say that, but then in the next breath he'll say that you need to have a good teacher. Yeah. So how do we relate to the teacher? That's what the topic is today, as students and as teachers. And Maizumi Roshi had a placard that he wrote when he opened the Zen Center in LA. It says, momentarily, there's teacher and student and junior and senior, but forever, we're all Buddhists. But of course we have to realize it. Sure. I just want to say two short things. One is that problems of teacher abuse only happen in sanghas where things are hidden, where it's not safe to talk about things. And Roshi Shinko and I hope to foster a sangha, where any topic can be brought up, in the open. And to me, that's a sign of a healthy sangha. So many religions, and Buddhism is no exception, are so hierarchical and patriarchal that anybody who questions it, is often ostracized, but we certainly don't want that. Last week we talked about the teacher-student relationship in certain terms about how the evolution of the relationship goes, and we had a very heartfelt discussion about it, how in the initial stages there has to be trust that's developed between the teacher and the student, and this is generalized, and then the teacher is often idealized by the student, and then when the student realizes that the teacher is human, then demonized, and quite often the relationship ends at that point, unless we can go to transition through where it becomes more of a normalized relationship that of a mutual appreciation, where the teacher is looked upon as somebody who can help guide and the student in their teachings, in their path, and the trust is reestablished, and it's more of a mutual appreciation relationship. But it's not one of equal in terms of the Dharma, the teaching, but it becomes equal in terms of being on the path together. And today I wanted to continue that theme, but I sent out to those on the mailing list, and if you're not on the mailing list, let me know and I'll make sure you get on. And I mentioned a koan that appears both in the Blue Cliff Records and in the Book of Equanimity, where a Bhikkhu addressed the assembly saying, "All of you, without exception, are wine drag-eating fellows. Pilgrimaging thus, when will there ever be a day for you? Don't you know there are no Zen masters in all of Tang China?" At that time, a monk who was there stepped forward and said, "What about those everywhere who have disciples and lead assemblies?" And the Bhikkhu remarked, "I didn't say there's no Zen, just there are no teachers of Zen." So a lot of people take this to mean that there are no teachers of Zen, that I'm my own teacher and I have to find my own way, but which is true, but people who have done that without a teacher generally are not very clear. I mean, this is my experience. I mean, I've had people who have come to tell me they've been sitting for 10 years and had all these great experiences, and it's been true in every case that they've just been self-deluded about what they were doing. And in the history of Buddhism and Zen in particular, there's one person who didn't have a teacher, and that was the Buddha. There are people who are called pratika Buddhas who might have spontaneous awakenings, but they need to verify it with another teacher. And there's, particularly in the modern culture, there's a lot of self-proclaimed gurus, and I would just be very careful about it if they haven't really had a training with somebody. So what does Obaka mean there are no teachers? We'll get back to that. Because Dogen, in a couple of fascicles, one of them Gakudo Yojinshu, which means guidelines for studying the way, he says you should seek a true teacher to practice Zen and study the way. And then in the Tenzo Kyokan he says, not to encounter a true teacher will result in being led around by your feelings and emotions. And then I threw in an anecdote, which was a conversation between a new teacher and a veteran teacher, and the new teacher said, "What do you think teaching is?" And the veteran said, "It's 50% encouragement." And then the novice teacher said, "And what's the other 50%?" And he said, "Encouragement." So just encouraging. And my teacher had a placard in the Zendo, and part of it said, "Let us be harmonious, like milk dissolved into water, Temporarily, there are the relationships of students to teachers and juniors to seniors. However, eventually all of us will be Buddhas forever. We should maintain the Buddha mind moment after moment. So, in one case, Obaku is saying there's no Zen teachers, and the other Dogen is strongly encouraging to find a true teacher. Without a true teacher, he said that you'll just be buffeted about by the winds of change. So, a teacher can't give you anything. It can just help you dispel the clouds of delusion so that your true goodness, your true wisdom can naturally emerge. That's what the role of a teacher is, and we have all kinds of skillful means for doing that. And in our tradition, we use koans. So I'm going to talk a little bit about this koan of Obaku, where he says there's no teachers of Zen. So we just chanted the Heart Sutra this morning, and it said, no eye, no ear, no nose, no tongue, no body. Anybody? What's no eye?
You look so good, Roshi, this morning.
Okay. What about no ear?
Oh, your words are so beautiful. Yeah, flowers, my ears.
Yeah, the chickens are making a lot of noise, aren't they? So when you become totally one with something, what happens? When you're totally one, what happens?
The I dissolves.
Hmm?
The I dissolves.
Say again?
The I dissolves.
The I dissolves, the air dissolves. You're totally one with it.
No concepts.
Yeah. When you're totally one, you disappear. Because if you're there and the sound is there, that's two. Right? And when you're totally it, it's just the sound of the wind. No ear. The flowers are so fragrant. No nose. Just that, right? So what's no teacher?
Also, in the context of that koan, the students were like going everywhere,
Yeah.
looking for teachers, and commenting on the teachers and not sticking to any teachers. Just like an obsessive compulsion of meeting teachers. So it's like pulling the rug out of their feet. There are no teachers. What does he call them?
Wine, drink, slurping fellows.
Yeah. It's like, what are you looking for? It's like pointing to the emptiness of all things. It's, what the heck are you doing?
Yeah. But if we are totally empty, then that space is totally open, and that space encompasses both the student and the teacher. So, Bob was saying you're wandering around here and there. When you ever going to find the time for yourself? Yeah. So if we're looking outside ourselves for something, we will never find it. But at the same time, being in a relationship with a teacher can help us. How? So anyway, like I said last week, I studied with my teacher for 23 years till he died, and I looked around and had a heart connection with him. I had another teacher before him, but then I moved and he moved, and then I met my Shishin Wick Roshi in Los Angeles. And I was really fortunate because I lived with him for 8 years in the Zen Center, and I saw him on almost a daily basis of study. And as we talked about last time, I mean, all teachers have their weaknesses, their human foibles, you know. But take, you know, what's good. And when my Zen Roshi asked me to teach, it was in the 80s. That's all students brought in, with their personal issues, you know. And I thought, yeah, I never brought personal issues to my Zen Roshi when I was studying with them. And I couldn't believe it. And I went to Bernie Glassman, who was the senior disciple, and I said, what's this about, you know? And he said, well, that's what's on their mind, you know, when they sit, when they do meditation. That's all that's going on, you know? Just spinning around in their brain, you know, about, you know, don't mean to trivialize it, but quite often it's about whether you put the toilet paper with it rolling off towards the wall or rolling off away from the wall, you know.
There is a right way.
Huh? There is a right way, yes. There's a right way to put the toilet paper in the holder. And a lot of the things, you know, if you boil them down, that's what they you know, they amount to, you know. Relationship is a right way to have a relationship. You know? And I know what it is, but my partner doesn't. So I quickly had to learn, you know, that's what students are going to bring in, you know, and how to deal with it. And like, it took this, it percolated for many years, and then when Roshi Shinko and I got together, we created the Great Heart Way, which is how to deal with personal issues in the context of meditation, And that's something that's unique, you know, I think, in the West when Buddhism came here, because Dogen, who wrote this about, you know, you'll be pulled around by your feelings and emotions, led around by your feelings and emotions. He was a monk. He lived in a monastery. All of his students were monks. You know, there was a tight community. There weren't any women there, you know, and so, and the way they deal with it, if people are too emotional or too disruptive in monasteries, they kick them out. They don't deal with it, you know, in any deep way. But you know, everybody practicing here is a lay person. They're not monks, you know. So in the United States, more and more and more, you know, that's what we're dealing with, and so that's what we have to deal with. And so part of it is developing that trust and that openness and that vulnerability in a relationship between teacher and student. Just being open, and it's hard. If you've been hurt, it's hard to do that, you know. But without that, you know, it's impossible to really penetrate into this practice. As long as we're armored and protected in any way, that's going to prevent us from really going deep into this and experiencing the emptiness. That is an important part of our practice, because then that emptiness is the ground of being that everything else arises from. And if we see that, then we don't take a lot of these things so seriously that we would otherwise. I think there's two very serious problems that we have to look at in all of these cases. One of them is secrecy. You know, that these things are kept hidden. And, you know, they say that, you know, in Trungpa Rinpoche's case, it was all wide open, everybody knew about it, so it was okay. Well, I'll get to that in a second. But the secrecy is really causing real problems. In the case of Zen Center Los Angeles, I was there. And a lot of people left who were not directly affected in that way by the teacher, but it might have opened up, you know, either their own traumatic wounds when they heard about it, or, like this article says, their disappointment, you know, in not having a perfect master. But I do think that it damages the Dharma, people lose trust and confidence. I mean, the fact that a teacher is human, I mean, that's what we are. We're in human bodies, but we're also, our vows are to minimize or put an end to suffering. And what are these people doing? They're creating more suffering. I don't know. So, the kind of the damage that they're causing is that the people who are directly affected quite often lose respect isn't the right word, but they lose their confidence or their trust in the Dharma, and say this is just all sham, it's just perpetrated by these teachers who want to abuse, glorify themselves and abuse the power, so there's no truth in this. If there were truth in it, teachers wouldn't be like that. Okay? But still, violating the precepts to that degree, I think that a teacher needs to acknowledge it and needs to repent for it and needs to, what's the word? Restitution. There has to be some restitution. Now, I will say that Maezumi Roshi didn't understand at all what Bernie was doing, what Daido was doing, what Genpo was doing, but he said that you have to find your own way. He supported all of his disciples, even though he didn't fully understand what we were all doing. I think it's true, that imperfect teachers can transmit to their disciples, and the disciples hopefully will be better than the teachers. We use the word master here because there's a big distinction in Spanish. The word maestro has to be used for a spiritual teacher. The word teacher is for somebody who's an academic teacher. So.